So on that, I mean, as you know, productivity and time management is a
passion of yours.
I would say it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, it's very easy to procrastinate. Spend all your time on maybe research or planning or other tasks that you can sort of justify as work. But as you mentioned, you don't get to the important tasks that bring in the money. Whatever it is in your business or startup, maybe picking up the phone, talking to customers, setting up partnerships or relationships, making sales, all those sort of high value, high money sort of activities. So to me, it seems like there's a resistance within that for many of us that stop us sort of going ahead and being productive and focusing on those high value tasks. Can you talk to me a little bit more about this and try and, I guess, from a startup's perspective, them getting into business and trying to, like you mentioned, focus on the important things? What can we do to stop procrastinating and focus on the important tasks?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that those are some great examples. That what you said, research on the internet. That's a brilliant one. I mean, that's a huge source of procrastination, especially because there's so much great stuff to read on the internet about how to build a business and all that kind of stuff, that loads of entrepreneurs get absolutely just, their time is destroyed by research on the internet. So I think that to figure out how to overcome that form of procrastination, this is why psychology is so important. You really have to look at the root cause for that behavior, because nobody really asks why we procrastinate. Because it is so common. Procrastination is ubiquitous. It's not just entrepreneurs who procrastinate, that we don't really question it. But when we look at why we are procrastinating, there's always a deeper reason. And 9 times out of 10 that comes down to fear. It comes down to the kind of apprehension that we feel that if we stop researching on the internet and go and pick up the phone and make those sales calls to those prospect clients, that we may be rejected. So it's a lot easier, there's less resistance to go and do research on the internet. And because you have that research on your to-do list maybe, you can kid yourself into thinking that you're doing significant work. Now imagine that effect compounded across all of the other tasks that an entrepreneur has to complete. It's a lot easier and there's less to feel when it comes to managing your employee payroll. And that's a task that can take a huge amount of time, and you're not necessarily going to want to outsource that, even though you probably should, if you're enjoying the fact, deep down at an unconscious level, you're enjoying your ability to procrastinate things that are going to have more of an impact, that you're more afraid of, by looking after these kind of mundane administration tasks. So that form of, there's a lot of different levels of procrastination, from the I'm procrastinating by watching TV level, which is kind of right at the bottom there. You're sitting on the couch and you're procrastinating when you do that, to doing the online research where you're reading business websites and you think that you're learning stuff that's significant, and that's where you're kind of kidding yourself a little bit. Then to procrastinating by working on work that doesn't count, that's not totally urgent, that's not significant. And sales is a great example of stuff that people, a lot of people put off. Certainly in young businesses and startup organizations, that kind of sales and focus on cash flow, on bringing money through the door is the primary concern. Every venture capitalist, every business mentor, coach, or whatever is going to agree that you've got to focus on making money, because that's what you're in business to do. And yet so many people, so many entrepreneurs spend so much time procrastinating by finding other tasks to do. So it's really about, if you want to overcome that, it's really about taking a good hard look at what's going on in your unconscious mind, what it is that you're really fearing, and figuring out how to confront those fears. And I think the first step for that is actually acknowledging it, because a lot of entrepreneurs are in denial about the fact that they're actually afraid of making those sales calls or doing whatever it might be. So it sounds cliche, but the first step is just admitting that you've got a problem.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, let's talk a little bit more about sales and psychology, because you brought it up there. I mean, I know you do quite a lot of sales training for whole sales teams for big companies, training and motivation and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Selling is such an important skill or an activity for an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned fear, but other than fear, why is selling so hard for so many people?
Other than fear, I think fear's pretty much got it covered. Yeah. I mean, selling is yeah, selling is not difficult. It's really just communication, and I think that's how I often frame sales, because a lot of entrepreneurs think they're gonna, they're going to outsource the sales component of their business, which is fine in some industries and in some business models. That's cool, but you really have to know how to sell no matter what you're doing, because if you're not actually pitching your product to prospect customers, which many businesses don't kind of do direct sales like that, then you as an entrepreneur, as the leader and the owner of your business, are going to have to sell your ideas to your team. You're going to have to sell your ideas, you're going to have to sell your vision for the business to everyone that you work with. You're going to have to sell your business plan to any investors. So sales skills are absolutely critical, and a lot of people don't realize just how kind of universally applicable good sales skills are. But when you look at it like that, it really just is communication. So if you can learn to overcome fear, you're 95% there, and the rest of it is all figuring out how to elegantly express yourself, really. So if you want to be a real expert at selling, get that business acumen under your belt, but that really is just a small percentage of the bigger challenge. The rest of it is really about overcoming that fear of putting yourself out there to potentially to be rejected, to be judged, standing up in front of a room full of people, and everyone faces that, and to some extent there's a lot of psychological stuff you can do to overcome that, a lot of personal development that you can do to get a head start on that, but at the end of the day it's experience that really kind of does it. So I mean, my recommendation for anybody who wants to start a little business, and I get lots of people like that asking me questions, who hasn't been able to do that sales stuff, who's really struggled with that in the past, is pigeonhole your business idea, for a year, for 6 months or a year. Go and get a job in sales, start out in telemarketing if you have to, and get comfortable with pitching people, get comfortable with communicating with people. Go and work in business to business sales, and if you can, at the end of your year's kind of sabbatical as a salesperson, it's not really a sabbatical, it's hard work, but at the end of that, if you can get in front of a boardroom of people, high-level executives, and pitch a product or something, whatever it is, then you've probably got what it takes to be able to, to have the sales skills that a startup entrepreneur is going to need. So then, once you've done that, once you've mastered that skill set, that's the time to push go on your brilliant business idea. But I would warn any entrepreneur that starting a business, no matter what kind of business you're in, without sales skills is a very, you're going to have a steep learning curve ahead of you.
You've absolutely answered my next question, following up about that, so great. Taking action. Action's a bit of a buzzword in the NLP success psychology circle.
Sure, yeah.
What does it mean, and why is it so important?
What does action mean? Action is important, and it comes back down to that procrastination thing, because a lot of people spend a lot of time not doing stuff. That's really what it's all about. Action is completing the tasks, is checking things off of the to-do list, of taking of carrying out the activities that are going to move your business closer to your goals, closer to the assumptions that your business plan is built on. So action taking is a buzzword. People love to talk about taking action, and it's critical, I think, because action is the ability to take action is what differentiates the winners in business and the entrepreneurs who have got a shot, who are actually going somewhere, and the people who are just playing. So there's a kind of a line in the sand between those two parties of people who are out there taking action, who are doing things, who are engaging in the sales meetings, who are picking up the phone and talking to prospects, who are shipping their product out the door and getting stuff done, versus the people who are in that, I don't want to call it the startup stage, because that word can mean something else, but I guess in that idea stage. I often talk about people who have got more ideas than they've got action. And I think that that's really what the difference is. If you're idea rich and action poor, then your business isn't going to be going anywhere. I would trade the ability to take action on a daily basis for hours at a time consistently to just get stuff done. I would trade that for the inspiration of genius ideas every single time. I would trade 99 brilliant ideas for just a week of solid action taking, if that makes sense, because I think that the action is so much more valuable. Ideas are cheap, and there's many of them out there, but it's people who actually have what it takes to make something of them that are rare.
So, okay, I see the importance then. Is it just, I mean, the things that you mentioned before, say like fear or limiting beliefs, or things like that, are they the things that stop people taking action though? Like, what is it, I mean, you might have this idea and you know, like you said, you're doing the payroll and you sort of think you're doing the important things, but I mean, there seems to be a clear difference between what you're saying is taking action, which is working on the high value, useful things.
Yeah.
Is it just that, getting rid of those fears and just pushing through it, or you know, maybe doing some sort of personal development, getting rid of those limiting beliefs? Like, what can a startup or, you know, an entrepreneur listening to this now that has problems with taking action, what can they do to fix that?
Okay, well, two answers. The first is that no one else can tell you what your significant work that counts important stuff is. The only person who knows that is you, and the way to figure out if you're at all uncertain about that, it really just comes down to the fact that you don't have you're not kind of communicating effectively with your intuition, because deep down you know what you should be working on. Yeah, everybody knows what they should be working on. It's just whether or not you can admit that to yourself and stop doing whatever it is that you're wasting time doing and actually go and do that. So it's an intuition thing. It's just a matter of asking that question, am I doing what I should be doing right now? Am I doing the thing that is going to move me towards my goals the fastest right now? Am I working on priority number one? And of course you're going to have to spend time, like everyone has to file their taxes every year. It's totally important, it's urgent, but does it really, I mean, does filing taxes have a huge impact on the entrepreneurialism of what we're trying to achieve? I would say no, some would disagree, but you know, at the end of the day, you decide what's important and what's not. So, and the second answer to your question is that there's just three psychological things that stand between people and taking action. The first one is that emotional kind of roadblock, fear, whatever it might be. The second is limiting beliefs, and the third is internal conflict, which is that kind of halfway state of pulling yourself in two directions, of indecision that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. So that's when you've kind of got priority number one, or is it? You know, you don't know what you should be doing necessarily. It feels like you're tugging yourself in two directions. That's what I would call internal conflict.
Okay, I understand that. Can you talk to me a little bit more about inner conflicts or internal conflicts? Why do we have these inner conflicts?
Why? Wow, that's a big question. Why do we have internal conflict? It's internal conflict is a really common kind of psychological issue that quite a few people struggle with. Not just entrepreneurs. It's there for a lot of people. Whenever there's indecision, we're faced with two roads ahead, and we have to kind of select which way to go. We quite often find ourselves quite conflicted about that. We're not sure what we want. It's almost as though, you know, a lot of people who think deeply about this stuff, would describe one of those. Almost one of those scenarios where there's like a little angel sitting on one shoulder and a little devil sitting on the other, and you're not quite sure which one's which. You don't know which one's right. You don't know quite what you should be doing in this scenario. Now those parts of ourselves pop up actually as a result of limiting beliefs. If we want to talk quickly about the kind of psychology behind it, when we have a limiting belief that says I'm not good enough, you know, that's a horrible limiting belief as an example. But quite often a lot of people won't believe that congruently about themselves. When that belief first pops up in their childhood or at the beginning of their business career or whatever it might be, another little part of them pops up and says, you know what, you actually are good enough. So instantly they have this internal incongruence. They have this internal war zone where there's that little angel saying, you are good enough, I believe in you. And there's that little devil saying, you're not good enough, don't stick your neck out, you're going to get laughed at, you're going to fail. And it's that internal dialogue between those two conflicting parts that creates that turmoil every time we face a decision. So if you're an entrepreneur thinking, okay, is this product ready to go to market? You've been working on your magical widget, you know, for the last 6 months, you're ready to ship it out the door, but that little voice says, but is it? Is it ready? That's internal conflict.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get that. So probably the big question is what can we do to eliminate that internal conflict?
Well, that's something that to be honest, that's something that I've built a successful career on, to be honest, charging people for the advice for overcoming internal conflict, because it is a huge roadblock and it's something I work on with a lot of clients. So quick tip, what it really comes down to is figuring out the ultimate highest intention of those two parts that are at war with one another. because when you've got internal conflict, it literally is like there's another person inside of your head that's disagreeing with you or sowing those seeds of doubt.